Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and it's been an interesting weekend of the G7 meeting in Cornwall. Boris Johnson was looking forward to this for months. He is very excited about hosting world leaders post-Brexit, his chance to launch his ill-considered global Britain. He was especially looking forward to hosting the new US President, Joe Biden. But like so many kids at Christmas, what he thought he wanted has turned to bitter disappointment, as world leaders that he was excited to be hosting have not played along with his boorish games. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So let's kick off with President Biden's gift to Johnson. Now, these sort of diplomatic gifts can just be what they are. It's just something that, unites them in terms of their interests, but they can be rich with symbolism too. They can be given in a spirit of friendship or hyper-passive aggression, and the bike seems to have been the latter. See, I remember when the Queen last hosted President Trump. Other senior royals were simply refusing to speak to him, but the Queen obviously has no such choice. She had to talk to him. But she was a bit cunning. She was showing him around a few things and pointed to a horse statuette and asked him about it. He didn't recognise it at all. It took his wife to remind the orange one that that was actually the gift that Trump gave to Her Majesty when he visited previously. This was the Queen's way of showing up a boorish lout in a very diplomatic way. Has Biden done the same to our bag of custard with his gift of a bike? Well, the choice of a bicycle is benign enough. Johnson is a cyclist of sorts, and indeed I seem to remember one of the few useful things he did as Mayor of London was championing the increased use of cycles. I think, actual Londoners can tell me how well it went, but it was certainly one of his things. And then you look at how it's decorated. See, on the helmet, there is an interlinked Union flag and stars and stripes. Lovely gesture of partnership, absolutely. But now look at the bike itself. See, on the frame, the Union flag is prominent. And it's not just prominent, it is the most prominent. There's nothing rude about the symbolism there. The Union flag, part of the design, is by far the most eye-catching part, and what you would still see even with a rider on it. But at the top of the frame, there is a design based on the American flag also, and then the EU flag, side by side. A gift from the US to the UK, and it includes the EU flag design on the frame. Now, why would that be? Because it's not like it contained designs for all of the flags of the G7, for example, that just so happened to have the EU. It also had the Canadian flag and blah, blah, blah. No, none of that. There are 3 flag designs there, the UK, the US, and the EU. Now, you could be charitable and suggest it's a little hint that all 3 should work together for common cause. But when you are trying to be symbolic with diplomatic gifts, and this is clearly symbolic, after all, there's no throwaway, let's just stick an EU flag on it. Should we stick the Canadian flag on it as well, or the Japanese? No. There is no such thing as a detail that isn't fully considered. The US and EU flags are both above the Union flag, and they are both together. We are working together, the message screams out, and you seem to be separated from us. But this was a subtle message. There were also less subtle ones. Presidents Macron and Biden held a short press conference outside where Macron welcomed America back into the fold. He welcomed the new US administration deciding to cooperate with the world. Biden was in full agreement. America was back, he said. He wasn't just a new president taking America in a different direction. He was clearly acknowledging that America had behaved poorly in the previous administration. The pro-Brexit media were complaining that as well as the leaders of all 7 G7 nations, the EU also had 2 leaders in attendance. Now, this is something that's always been the case. Always. Since it was the G8, this was the case. People seem to be unable, I certainly am unable, to find examples of these media complaining about this in the past. The complaints now are not born of a new hatred for the EU. They always had that. This is born of fear. Perhaps they know that Brexit is finished if people see just how damaging it is to the UK's international standing. They fear that the EU's influence is now greater than Britain's. It's not even, I was going to say a growing influence. I mean, I suppose it is in a way, but it's not even that it has been growing, because that influence has been there for a long time. Like I said, they've had these seats at the G7, even though that for decades, or for the 2 decades that these things have been going on. People should remember that the G7 has not always been the G7 either. It wasn't all that long ago that it was the G8. But the group is not like the EU. If a member wants to fly against its values, now there will of course be initial wagging of fingers, and that's what happened this weekend. It was sort yourself out. But eventually be asked to leave the party if you keep pissing in the punch bowl. There is no reason why the G7 cannot become the G6. It was the G8, it became the G7. Could become the G6. Not that the previously ejected government would be displeased with how things are going on without them. Putin will have been absolutely delighted that the remainder of the group are so at odds. This is why he's sunk resources into Brexit. Disunity amongst his opponents is almost as good as a tangible win for his own side. There are still a lot of people that do not realise just how badly Brexit and our Brexit government are trashing our international standing. You know, I point out that for the first time, very recently, we've now lost our seat on the International Court of Justice, which is huge, massive ramifications. But these people are not exactly household names, so most of the public, it just passes them by. Other examples, similarly not on most people's radars. But ejection from the G7 would be noticed. Johnson knew that he needed to make this a success. Granted, he didn't need to make it a real success. He never thinks in terms of real success, only a good show. But remember how it started. Johnson said that he would not be disagreeing with Biden on anything. He just wanted the good photo opportunities. But did he really think he could just joke and smile his way through this? This is a meeting of world leaders. They are here to discuss serious issues of common interest. They understand that the world does not simply turn as it will, it's driven, directed. It's serious. This is serious stuff. But Johnson is not a serious leader. He thinks leadership is raising a glass of champagne and throwing out the odd quip. He is the classic drunken after-dinner speaker. That's all he's fit for, and it's what he'll end up doing when he's no longer a politician. It's like he was simply not expecting leader after leader to be laying down the law for him on his international obligations. I wondered if it's been a bit like being a spoiled child. You have a birthday party and they think they can behave as badly as they like, and none of the guests are allowed to object because, you know, it's their party, it's their day. But this isn't a party. I said some time ago, when Johnson announced for the second time his intention to refuse to comply with his own Northern Ireland protocol. We really should change the name. Maybe this is what's confusing for him. Maybe we shouldn't call it the Northern Ireland protocol. Maybe we should call it the Boris Johnson protocol, because he negotiated it. Or David Frost negotiated it on behalf of Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was the one who sold it to the country. We should call it the Boris Johnson protocol. You know, and I said that he's going to need it sorting before the G7, or he's going to get mugged. His grand global show is going to descend into acrimony. So I actually genuinely thought to myself, he was just doing it he was just doing it to make a big show. He'd get some concessions, which were already going on behind the lines anyway, and then he would come back and say, we've won this concession from the EU, which was stuff they were happy to do anyway, and sell it as a win, and we could just keep going on this endless cycle. I genuinely thought that would happen. It's very wrong. He didn't sort it out. He didn't, and the proceedings did descend into rancour. The other leaders were not here to talk about Brexit. It wasn't on the agenda. They were here to talk about Russia, China, climate change. But what they were discussing with one another were those things, the important things. No point discussing those things with Boris Johnson. He's got nothing useful to say. All they had to say to Johnson was get your act together. They made it clear that they do not trust Boris Johnson and therefore, by extension, the UK until we get rid of him. The accord that Johnson and Biden jointly signed was an ego boost for Johnson, who made sure to recount how it was intended to mirror that signed by Churchill and Roosevelt, because he likes to think he's the living embodiment of Churchill again. But it's not a treaty. It's not a deal. It's not worth the paper it's written on without trust. It's a statement of intent, really. It gets us nothing in itself. Media from the other G7 nations are not being shy about reporting the contempt that their leaders have been showing to Boris Johnson on his own patch. It got so bad that Johnson completely melted down. Because remember, this is not a guy with a plan as such. He sort of has plans. But when things go awry, he's not calm. You can tell it sometimes in PMQs when he's genuinely flapping. And he did it again here. He melted down and started threatening to suspend the entire Northern Ireland Protocol again. On the world stage. That's his Brexit Britain. Not just refusing to implement bits of it, which is what he's really doing at the moment, but actual suspension. Not legal, of course, and idle threats are of no value from someone who makes threats freely but has never had any follow-through. And a lack of follow-through on this is not even a criticism this time. If he actually chose for this to be the first thing he ever actually followed through in his life, he would be slapped good and hard. So hard, in fact, that we'd all feel the blow. I can never be sure with a madman like Johnson, but I don't believe he'd actually make good on his pointless threats. Not just because he doesn't want to deal with the direct consequences of trade sanctions, but because he doesn't want to risk uniting the country against Brexit. There is another reason, which is going to be in the second video today as well. But this G7 was, from our point of view, a complete disaster. Complete disaster for Johnson, diplomatically. He's now given a clear ultimatum, making himself look strong to the gammons for a few days, and then a hopelessly impotent fool when his 7-day deadline comes and goes, which I will be remarking on in 7 days' time, with the intended audience ignoring him, of course. And with the G7 over, EU leaders will be meeting with President Biden on the continent to have a conference of grown-ups. Here's the thing. Johnson, this was his chance, or he saw it as his chance to win over Biden to his way of thinking. But he didn't. Because, of course, his way of thinking is nonsense. And anyone that doesn't get their information from the Express knows it's nonsense. And now the EU leaders have got Biden to themselves for another conference for which Johnson isn't invited. Well, he disinvited himself by pulling us out of the Union. You know, like the guests leaving the brat's birthday party to have their own gathering amongst more convivial company. So what has Johnson actually gained from hosting this meeting of the G7? I saw someone suggesting good photo ops and, you know, because of the way the media are very soft towards him, be good coverage. Is it? I haven't seen any. Even in the strongest supporters, where are the headlines hailing the great success? Even his supporter media can only report on the arguments. Sure, they're blaming the EU, but all they can report on is the arguments. It's a complete shambles. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.